Welcome to the early comers. We've opened the portal so you can come on to the webinar today. We'll wait for a few more minutes until we get a few more and then do some quick introductions and get started on the webinar. So as we're waiting on the others to come on board, I just wanted to start some quick introductions. To begin with, I'm Dr. Heidi Loeb-Price. In the veterinary world, I'm a dentist, a veterinary dentist. But in my semi-retirement, I've taken a great interest in senior pets, in the aging of pets, and how important it is for us. And in this journey, I have been able to meet with two amazing groups. One, of course, is the Gray Muzzle organization that does phenomenal a job of raising funds and then applying these funds to grants to organizations that help our senior dogs. And last year, I believe it was like 880,000. So absolutely amazing. The second group we're going to learn a lot about today, called the Dog Aging Project. And this project is almost beyond comprehension with the data they are collecting, the information they're collecting from clinical people, but the scientists are the owners, the pet owners. They're partnering with pet owners to get this massive amount of data to find out what influences are there in aging in dogs, and then trying to apply that to see how we can get that really healthy lifespan. They use the term health span. I love that term, health span. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Kate Illing. She's from my alma mater, Texas A&M University. I'll give a whoop there. And she is a research fellow with the Dog Aging Project. And Dr. Illing, take it.
Hey, hello everybody. Thank you so much for coming out today. I'm really excited to tell all of you about the Dog Aging Project. I'm Dr. Kate Illing. I'm actually a veterinarian of Canadian origin. You might notice I don't have much of a Texas accent, but I've had the pleasure of spending my most recent year down here at Texas A&M working with one of the world's largest longitudinal studies of companion pet dogs. So I'm going to be talking to you today about our research group, the Dog Aging Project, about our work, and hopefully you'll be as excited about it as I am by the end. So I'll start off today by talking about my objectives for this presentation. I hope that today, after today, I hope that you guys can find out how studying aging in dogs can help us learn more about aging in people as well. I hope that you'll be able to understand the Dog Aging Project's design and our goals. I want to share with you some of our currently ongoing research on dog health and aging. And I also want to give you guys some information on how you can participate yourself in the world's largest community science study of companion dogs. There we go. So for the structure of today's presentation, I'm going to start by talking about the rationale for our research and the benefits of studying dog aging for both pets and their people. I will introduce you a bit more to the Dog Aging Project, how we collect our data, how we partner with our community dog owners. I'll move on to talk a little bit about our ongoing research, and then we'll talk about what's next for the Dog Aging Project in the future. So why is studying aging so important? In 2018, for the first time in history, the persons in the world aged 65 or above outnumbered children under age 5. And by 2050, 1 in 6 people in the world will be over age 65, which is going to be up from 1 in 11 in 2019. The number of persons aged 80 years or older is projected to triple from 143 million in 2019 to 426 million in 2050. All of this means that aging research is more important now than ever before. When we think about chronic diseases that affect humans, we know most of us are pretty familiar with a lot of the factors that contribute to those diseases, like tobacco, alcohol, diet, genetics. But the truth is, when you add in the effect of 20 years of aging on your risk level for these diseases, it far outstrips the effect on risk level of those other lifestyle changes. Another reason to study aging is that different people age differently. I like to think about my paternal grandmother, who is an example of what I would call very successful aging. Well into her 80s, she liked to go for long walks with her dogs, even go swimming in the ocean. And she was a very active lady. Whereas some people age maybe what we would think a little bit less successfully. Like I think of my other grandmother who tends to need a lot of help with mobility and with activities of daily living at the same age. So even though we're all humans, human people seem to have different trajectories of aging. We know that those aging outcomes are affected by a wide variety of factors. We know it's affected by our lifestyles, by our dietary choices, our exercise patterns, by the environment that we live in, by our access to preventative and therapeutic care, by our socioeconomic status, by our genetic diversity, and by whatever medical diagnoses we pick up along the way. All of those exposures lead to our aging outcomes, whether we end up with robust health, whether we end up trying to deal with some chronic disease, and those ultimate effects on our lifespan. This is where we come to geroscience, or the study of aging, something that I'm sure all of you who are enthusiastic about brain muscles are very enthusiastic about. So the geroscience, or the study of aging, is based on several principles. The first principle is that these drivers of different aging outcomes can be understood. The second principle is that the drivers of different aging outcomes can be modified. And third is the principle that slowing biologic aging would slow the onset and progression of age-related disease. So improvements in healthy aging would clearly benefit society. People can contribute longer, can spend more time with their family. We, as a society, will have to spend less money on healthcare, and we'll have to spend proportionally less money on healthcare for aged people versus young people if our elderly are healthier. However, we do understand that prolongation of life is not always synonymous with the prolongation of good health. And that's where we come to the term health span. So all of you are probably already familiar with lifespan, which is simply the period of time for which a person is alive. So on my little arrow diagram here, your lifespan is the beginning of the arrow all the way to the end of the arrow, where this little rainbow drops off. We can contrast that with lifespan. With health span, pardon me. Scientists have come to recognize that it's not just living longer that matters, but preserving the full spectrum of health and activities that we enjoy for as long as possible as we age. So this is why we have the term health span. It refers to the period of time for which a person is active, healthy, and feeling good. On this little diagram here, it's represented by the green to yellowish areas, which represents their health. So health span lasts up until you start to develop age-related disease. And longer health span does not have to be achieved just by living longer. Instead, we can also target just improving the quality of life for the number of years that everyone has available. And we can do this by slowing the onset of age-related decline in physical activity, cognitive ability, ability to carry out activities of daily living, as well as trying to prevent or delay the development of age-related chronic disease. So studying aging comes with a few challenges. If we think about the average career of a researcher, that's about 35 years, whereas an average human lifespan in the Western world is somewhere around 80 years. So if a researcher wants to study aging and the human lifespan, you can't follow an entire human over the span of one person's career. It becomes even more difficult when we think about scientific funding and the grant cycle, whereas our grant cycle tends to be 5 years, and we are looking to be able to find some results by then so that we can continue to be funded. When we start to look at the more easy, practical, controlled models of aging, like, for example, laboratory mice, that comes with some downsides as well. A lot of populations of laboratory mice, they tend to be very genetically homogeneous. Sometimes they can even all be clones of each other. And they're living in a very controlled environment that doesn't necessarily reflect all the exposures that you, me, or even our pets would experience in their day-to-day lives. And we lose the chance to measure those sorts of effects, the effects of the real world. And this is where dogs come in. Dogs are actually a really fantastic model for aging and can teach us a lot about aging in both humans and dogs. So we know that dogs tend to live 10 to 15 years, depending on their breed and their size. And that shorter lifespan actually makes lifetime studies much more practical when we consider the career of a researcher or even a single grant cycle. Dog breeds can almost be treated like extended families, and they can help us study the effect of genetic variation on aging and on the development of age-related disease. Some of you might be aware that our aging dogs actually experience a spectrum of diseases really similar to those found in humans, including cancer, chronic kidney disease, dementia, all of these things that we can study in dogs. We can also apply to some degree our findings in people. Our companion animal dogs in people's homes, they share our environment. They literally eat our food, drink our water, sometimes sleep in our beds. So all of the things that you and I are exposed to in our environment, our dogs are too. So they provide a really fantastic model to start to look at some of those environmental exposures in a large mammal that has more similar biology to people. Dogs also are an attractive model for scientists because they have a highly sophisticated healthcare system. Dr. Heidi, who was talking to you before, is a veterinary dentist. You're probably aware that veterinarians have all sorts of specialties, from ophthalmology to cardiology to oncology and internal medicine. And this really affects the types of care that we can provide to our dogs and the ways in which they're described from a medical perspective. And another fantastic thing about dogs is that they have a very close relationship with humans and their families. And we find that owners have a strong commitment to individualized care for their dog, whatever that means for their personal family and their personal dog. And owners we find, have been very eager to volunteer for a study like this and to invest their time as community scientists to provide information about their dogs in pretty remarkable detail. So now I've explained a little bit why we want to study aging in dogs. So now I'm going to chat to you a little bit about how we're going to do that. So I'm going to start out by talking about the aging questions that we at the Dog Aging Project are trying to answer. First of all, it's important for us to understand how different individual dogs age differently. This type of research is really lacking in the companion animal field. We need to know what normal aging is in dogs, and how can we measure it? How can these measurements help us identify the dogs that are aging well versus the dogs who are maybe at a higher risk of developing age-related illnesses? And having those tools, those measurements, is going to help us study who's aging more successfully versus less successful. We also want to know why individuals age differently. We want to know how genetic diversity affects aging and how the way that our body expresses our genetics affects aging. We also want to know how variations in things like the external environment, our diet, our lifestyle, pollutants in the environment, our gut microbiome, how those things affect how we age. And lastly, of course, we want to know what can we do about it? How can we modify the process of aging? So at the Dog Aging Project, we want to document those lifestyle patterns that promote health span. And we also want to explore if there are any medical interventions that can extend health span for both our dogs and maybe that might have applications in humans as well. But as has been alluded previously, to answer these questions, we need data, and quite a lot of it. This is where the community science comes in. So the Dog Aging Project's approach to answering these questions is to study real dogs living in their family homes. And we found that maybe the best source of information about pet dogs is you guys, the dog owners themselves. So the central source of our data, our information about dogs, comes from dog owners who are interested in our mission and have volunteered to complete comprehensive yearly surveys about their dog's health, environment, and lifestyle. We then follow up with those owners and their dogs every year so that we can follow their dogs as they age. Owners are also invited to complete optional additional tasks, like performing fun activities that test their dog's memory and problem solving. We invite owners to upload their dogs' veterinary electronic medical records. And for dogs that are eligible for some smaller populations that we'd like to study, we often offer invitations to do additional tasks like collecting a cheek swab to get a DNA sample for sequencing, or collecting biological samples like blood and hair that we can study for biological markers of aging. Our study is the strongest if we have as many dogs of different ages, breeds, health status, lifestyles, environments, as diverse as possible so that we can produce a sample that's really robust and representative of dogs in the US. Another important principle of the Dog Aging Project is that we're committed to sharing our data with the public. After all, identifying information has been removed. Researchers around the world can access our data for free, as well as our survey instruments, which are hosted on a cloud-based computing platform. We also believe in promoting the accessibility of scientific information by sharing our findings through blog posts and newsletters, as well as through our peer-reviewed scientific journal articles, which are open access. The public response to our project has been pretty successful. We first unveiled our website about 5 years ago now in June 2019, where our website that allows the public to nominate their dogs went live. In November of that same year, we officially launched enrollment in the Dog Aging Project. And the response really exceeded our wildest expectations. So prior to that launch in November, we had about 4,000 nominations of people who wanted to join the study when it opened. But within a week of the launch proper, we grew to over 70,000 nominations. and have since exceeded 200,000 nominations, with more than 50,000 participants completing the enrollment process and filling out our surveys. We've also been covered by thousands of media outlets, including the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, NBC Nightly News, as well as many local news stations and newspapers. So from here, I'd like to sort of review what the enrollment process looks like, so that you guys can get a better understanding of how a dog goes from being nominated by their owners to becoming a member of the DAP Pack. So the first step to becoming a member of the Dog Aging Project Pack is for a participant to nominate their dog at our website, which is dogagingproject.org. Once a participant has nominated their dog, they'll receive an invitation to create their personal portal. They then have 40 days from the date of invitation to create their personal portal. And it's through that online portal that they will complete surveys, complete tasks if they wish, and receive any test results from breed analysis or DNA sequencing and other things. After they've created their portal, they'll be asked to review and sign our informed consent document, which goes over the study goals, the requirements, and much more. After consent, they'll be asked to complete the 10-section health and life experience survey, which takes about 1 to 3 hours. Participants can save and return to the HLES at any time within their 40-day completion window. Once that survey is complete, they are considered officially a member of the Dog Aging Project Pack, or the DAP Pack. All of our members receive a unique downloadable DAP Pack member certificate and an invitation to our dog park members only forum. We may also ask for the dog's veterinary electronic medical record, but it's not required. Having an electronic medical record is only required to be considered for certain cohorts, such as our clinical trial, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So based on all of that information, the dog is evaluated by our system to see if they meet eligibility requirements for some of the subgroups that we're trying to study, what we call cohorts. And then once a dog is a member of the Dog Aging Project Pack, the owners will be sent tests regularly throughout the year, and they'll also receive their annual follow-up survey in order to tell us how their dog's been doing over the past year. And they'll receive that on the anniversary of their enrollment date. So I've mentioned these smaller subgroups or cohorts that we're studying a couple of times now. So our largest cohort that encompasses all of our members is called the DAP Pack. We've had over 50,000 dogs enrolled to date. Within that DAP Pack, we have what's called our foundation cohort of 6,000 dogs, our precision cohort, which is 1,000 dogs, and our triad clinical trial, which currently has 150 dogs enrolled with an ultimate goal of having 580. Over the next few slides, I'm going to go over what participation in these cohorts entails. So first off, I'll talk about our largest cohort, the DAP Pack. The DAP Pack is our primary research cohort of the project. All enrolled dogs in the Dog Aging Project are members of the DAP Pack. There is no limit to the number of dogs that can be enrolled. Our DAP Pack dogs are our core research cohort who complete their annual health and life experience surveys to tell us all about their dog's behavior, environment, medical conditions, diet, supplement use, and are asked to update that once a year until the dog is no longer in the home. Some dogs may be invited to participate optionally in an additional cohort, and they will be invited from this group, but they'll always continue to be a member of the DAP Pack. Our next largest cohort is called Foundation. Foundation includes 8,500 unique dogs of all ages, sizes, and genetic backgrounds. Each participant in Foundation receives a cheek swab DNA kit, which we do a full sequence on. Our genome sequence data will eventually be integrated with health measures and age-related physiological and behavioral traits to carry out what's called a genome-wide association study of common diseases, frailty, and comorbidity associated with age. And the goal of that type of study is to try to find out what specific genes are associated with different health outcomes. Our next cohort is called Precision, and that consists of 1,000 dogs, also of all ages and breeds, from whom we collect, as well as DNA. We also collect blood, urine, feces, and hair samples, and we collect them annually for in-depth assays of things like fecal microbiome, for biological markers in urine and hair, and for yearly blood work as they age. The goal of the precision cohort is to identify the metabolomic predictors of disease and longevity, to understand how the gut microbiome changes with age and how these changes in microbiome diversity impact healthy aging. We want to almost be able to develop a sort of biological clock that can tell us what a dog's biological age is, to try to tell it as opposed to their chronological age. Our last cohort that's active right now is the Triad clinical trial. The Triad clinical trial, it stands for the test of rapamycin in aging dogs, and it's our only intervention cohort. Observational, we ask owners to complete, is a placebo control.
Dr. Illing, it looks like you may have hung up a little bit. Amanda, do we have any issues with the feed?
Nothing on my end. It might be her video.
She's
Oh,
back.
they're back.
Maybe turn off your face video.
Okay.
Hung up again. So while she's rectifying things on that end, I want to share with the group that in speaking with the dog aging project people, I was talking about telling other veterinarians about it for other patients and things like that. And I asked how many veterinarian pets were enrolled. And the answer I got was what I expected. While they may get good care, we're not real good at record keeping. So the detailed records that are important to have complete medical background on these pets and things like this, it's usually the client with the pet that does a much better job of keeping records. So there may be a few veterinary patients, their own patients in there, their own pets in there, but most of them are these community scientists. So they really rely a lot on people enrolling their dogs, providing the information, and then taking it from there as well. So it looks like Dr. Kate can you chat with us?
Yes,
Can
can you hear me? And can you see my
Yes.
screen still?
Okay, it looks good now. Go for it.
Okay, well, continue talking a little bit about Triad. So I'm not sure where I got cut off, but Triad is our only interventional cohort. We're performing what's called a double-blinded, placebo-controlled clinical trial of a medicine called rapamycin. Rapamycin has been shown to extend both lifespan and health span in laboratory animals at very low doses. This clinical trial is double-blind, which means that for all of our enrolled dogs, us, the scientists, and the owners themselves, we don't know whether they're getting rapamycin or a sugar pill. And the group that's receiving the sugar pill will be the control group that we use to tell whether or not the rapamycin has an effect. So each enrolled dog receives either rapamycin or the placebo for a period of 1 year. We monitor those dogs twice yearly during that year, as well as for an additional 2 years after the study medication is stopped. We follow them after the study medication was stopped because in some studies of rapamycin in laboratory animals, the positive effects last even after getting the rapamycin for a limited period of time. So we want to study it, see if that happens in dogs as well. In order to be considered for eligibility into our clinical trial, dogs need to be at least 7 years of age and at least 44 pounds. Their owners have to be willing to bring their dogs to one of our participating triad clinical sites regularly. And the dogs have to be cooperative for examination, including a blood collection and an ultrasound of the heart without sedation. And they have to be otherwise healthy except for some acceptable age-related changes at the time of enrollment. Though I should say again that we want for our broader clinical trial, for our broader study in the general DAP pack, we want dogs of all health statuses. All right. We're past the halfway point, but I'm going to briefly go over a few bits of recent research from our team. We're currently only a few years into data collection, and I think that our best is yet to come. However, while we continue to do the work enrolling dogs, collecting that data over time and developing our methods, we can still explore trends and relationships in a cross-sectional population of our participating dogs. And that's what I'm going to show you guys a few examples of. So one of the questions that we ask our owners is about if their dog has ever experienced a toxin ingestion. And one of the undergraduate summer students working with the Dog Aging Project last year decided to look at all of those toxin ingestions reported by our participating owners to see if she could find any trends. It'll perhaps be unsurprising to a few of you that the #1 most common toxin exposure reported by our owners is chocolate. And actually about 5% of dogs in the DAP pack have had a taste of our favorite treat here. #2 and #3 are grapes and raisins and human medications, respectively. Our undergraduate summer student, Maria, she also found out that when she mapped out when these toxin ingestions happened, that they were most prevalent in the summer and in the winter around the holidays. But that spike in December being mostly driven by chocolate ingestions, presumably around the Christmas break. Maria also found, perhaps surprisingly, perhaps unsurprisingly, if you're familiar with them, that pugs, dachshunds, and beagles were almost twice as likely to have a history of toxin ingestion compared to other breeds in our population. So one of our earliest exploratory studies that we did after collecting data for about a year looked at how many dogs in the Dog Aging Project pack had experienced tumors in their lifetime. So at this time, we had 1 year of health data on nearly 30,000 dogs, and we found that at least 1,200 of those dogs had experienced at least one tumor in their lifetime. What that works out to is that about 30 owners in every 1,000 participating in our study reported that their dog had a malignant tumor, and that half as many reported that if they had a benign tumor. We were also able to pull out that the most common location reported for tumors, both malignant and benign, was the skin of one of their legs or their paws. The next most common were external tumors under the skin, followed by tumors on the skin of their body or their head. So we recently revisited those findings now that we've collected data from 1 year to another for nearly 20,000 of our dogs. So a few members of our research team recently did a follow-up analysis to see how many dogs are diagnosed with a new cancer or tumor each year, and to see whether this number is affected by whether or not those dogs have had tumors in the past. So what we found out looking at those 17,000 dogs for whom we had consecutive data 1 year after another, is that over 500 were diagnosed with a new cancer between the time that they filled out their first survey and their 1 year follow-up. And those 500 dogs corresponds to 3% of the dogs participating in our project. However, when you pull out the dogs that have already had a history of a cancer diagnosis in the past, 13% of dogs who had already had one tumor developed another tumor within the next year. So these types of studies are really exploratory, but they help us become able to start to measure the impact of these different health conditions and help us plan where we want to focus our attention in the future as we're able to collect more data and see who develops these conditions over time. Another disease that's of major interest to a group that I want to talk to you about today is canine cognitive dysfunction. So canine cognitive dysfunction is a form of mental deterioration that we associate with aging in dogs. It's actually very similar to Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia in humans. What we see in affected dogs is progressive signs of things like disorientation, difficulty recognizing familiar people and environments. Affected dogs can have changes in their sleep-wake cycle, like getting up frequently in the night and wandering around. Dogs might have increased anxiety. They might have increased difficulty with changes of their routine and being in new places. And dogs can also start to have problems with house sitting when before they were fully house trained. So you can see how these symptoms cause canine cognitive dysfunction to have a serious impact on dogs who develop it in their later years of their life. So we already know in people that an active lifestyle is protective against Alzheimer's disease. So for this reason, one of our researchers, Emily Bray, as well as some other members of our team, looked at the relationship between physical activity and cognitive health in dogs using our data set. Both of those things are questions that are covered by the Health and Life Experience Survey. So Emily was able to look at over 11,000 senior and geriatric dogs who completed the relevant sections of the survey. And she found that dogs who are more physically active are less likely to display markers of cognitive dysfunction. So while we can only look at dogs' current activity and their current cognitive dysfunction, because we don't yet have enough data over time, we can't quite demonstrate cause and effect, but this really gives us hope that an active lifestyle might be similarly protective against dementia in dogs like it is in people. We looked at several other factors in addition to physical activity. Although again, we can't demonstrate cause and effect without more research and more data collected longitudinally over time, we did find that the use of neuroprotective supplements and having a history of behavioral training was also negatively associated with markers of cognitive dysfunction. So dogs that had experience with obedience training or other mental activities were less likely to have markers of cognitive dysfunction. So this might mean that mental activity and supplement use could have a protective effect against dementia in dogs as well. One last interesting finding that we haven't yet published is that the development of canine cognitive dysfunction correlates with age independently of body weight. What's strange about this is that we've demonstrated in previous studies that larger dogs have shorter lifespan and that they appear to age faster accordingly. However, this finding suggests that canine cognitive dysfunction might actually be an exception to that rule, meaning suggesting that all else being equal, a 10-year-old Labrador or a 10-year-old Yorkie might have a similar risk because they're the same age. And we don't currently completely understand the mechanism of canine cognitive dysfunction, but it certainly raises some interesting questions about why this is and why the risk seems to increase just with their age, rather than with where they are relatively in their lifespan. The last thing I want to talk to you a little bit about today is the Dog Aging Project's goal for upcoming years. So over the upcoming years, we want to validate our assessment of canine frailty to help us determine which dogs are more vulnerable to negative health outcomes in their old age. We're also going to be exploring how specific chronic diseases drive aging. Here I'm talking about specifically inflammatory diseases like even periodontal disease or obesity or chronic allergies. And if those have an influence speeding up aging. In the upcoming years, we're going to complete our genome-wide association study to try to find the genes that are related to aging and age-related phenotypes. We're also developing a cohort of dogs who are at the very highest level of longevity for their breed. And we're going to be investigating their genetic architecture to try to find out what's unique about them. As we collect our samples, we're going to try to identify the biological markers of aging in dogs and see how those can be used to predict aging outcomes. We're going to continue to try to identify lifestyle factors associated with healthy aging and investigate environmental exposures that influence aging outcomes. One thing that's interesting is that we know we have the zip code and the places that all of our dogs live. And we can connect that data with data from environmental protection organizations that tell us about air pollution, water quality in that area. And we're going to be trying to look into how those influence aging outcomes as well. Lastly, we are planning to complete our placebo-controlled clinical trial of rapamycin in dogs so that we can determine rapamycin's effect on lifespan and health outcomes. So I hope that this has helped you guys gain an understanding of what makes the Dog Aging Project unique. The Dog Aging Project is important because it's a very unique, comprehensive description of aging that's naturally variable in a species that's important because of its biological similarity to humans, as well as the social value of dogs. And we're going to be performing that description all the way from the population level where they live, what they eat, all the way down to the molecular level, what their genes are, what their gut microbiome is. We hope that our study is going to continue to discover the drivers of modifiable outcomes of healthy aging. And we're also working on discovering biomarkers of aging. Dog Aging Project is also notable in that we have the first large-scale lifespan interventional trial of the effect of a medication on aging performed out of a laboratory. So I'll end with a couple of take-home points. I hope that you guys go home understanding how studying canine aging is a powerful tool that has the potential to improve the lives of both humans and dogs. I'd like you guys to remember that the Dog Aging Project strength comes from studying a diverse group of dogs living in their natural homes with their families across the US for the duration of their lifetimes. And I hope that you can also appreciate the importance of open science methods and improving public access to health information. As I end my seminar, I'd like to give a thank you to all of our Dog Aging Project PAC members, as well as their owners and their veterinarians who make this study both possible and worthwhile. I'd like to acknowledge the National Institute on Aging, who funds the Dog Aging Project through a U19 grant. We're also funded in part by some private donations, who are displayed on the screen there. I'd also like to give my sincere thanks to the Gray Muzzle organization for hosting me today. And I'd like to open the floor to questions. You'll also see that I've included a QR code if you happen to have your cell phone on you and you want to check out our website or even nominate your own dog.
Very nice, Dr. Illing. So we do have few questions one from Eileen. Her dogs are 17 and 18 years old with kidney disease. Would they be viable participants?
Oh, absolutely. We want to study all dogs of every health status and every age. Even the information on their health history and the environment that they live in, and their behavior and their activity levels, all of that helps us define and adds to our data about what normal aging looks like in dogs, and when dogs develop what types of diseases. So we definitely welcome all dogs into our study, and we want all types of dogs in our study. We want whether they're healthy or whether they're living with chronic diseases.
And maybe they have a secret they could share with us too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
we
Judith,
also want to see pictures of them and hear about them in the dog park.
oh, absolutely. So Judith asked, are shelter dogs whose exact birth date is unknown and only have an estimated birth date eligible for the study?
Dogs with an exactly unknown birth date are definitely eligible for the study. Owners are often impressed by how comprehensive our health and life experience survey is. In the section where you indicate your dog's age, not only do we ask how old your dog is, but we also ask how you know it, whether it's been estimated, whether you've had them since a puppy, whether you got them from the breeder and you know the exact date. And we welcome all of those dogs into our study. I also know that we do have some dogs in our triad clinical trial who do have an estimated birth date, but I couldn't tell you right now whether or not that particular cohort has a few more requirements about the birth date. But definitely not knowing the exact birth date does not disqualify you, and we would love to have them.
Excellent. And Lindsay said this is truly incredible work. I agree. And she asked, I am presuming that you welcome mixed breeds as well.
Yes, we do. And actually, our dog aging project pack is split about 50-50 between mixed breeds and purebreds. So our lovable rescue mutts are definitely very well represented.
That's amazing. Just out of curiosity, if anybody who's listening has a dog who's already enrolled, other than Dr. Illing, of course. Wait a minute, did you enroll any of your dogs?
I myself don't currently have a dog.
Yeah.
I have a family dog, but they're all in Canada. And unfortunately, one of the few requirements for the study is that you be dogs be living in the US.
And I was going to ask, I'm lecturing in outside the US for a bit, but this is US dogs. Sorry about that. Anybody who's listening from outside. But
if you're Canadian, you have my sympathies.
Yeah. The other thing, the rapamycin I had heard about has been used and was originally used as an anti-rejection agent for organ transplants, and the potentials are just amazing.
Yes, so rapamycin is being studied for a whole host of different things. It was originally discovered as an immunosuppressive drug and used to prevent organ transplant rejections. But recently it's been found out that it has different biological effects at low doses. And it's been studied as a treatment for particular cancers. It's being studied for its anti-aging effects, which is what the Dog Aging Project is doing. There's also some ongoing rapamycin studies in dogs that are looking at its effect on periodontal disease, at its effect on heart disease, specifically dilated cardiomyopathy in large breed dogs. And there's also a study currently happening on rapamycin for heart disease in cats as well.
Yes. Yep, with their cardiomyopathy too.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see any other questions, so I would like to be among the entire group in thanking you so much for all this information. Oh, you need to tell us about the Institute.
Oh, the Institute.
Oh my
Right.
gosh, yeah, the Dog Aging Project Institute that's now open for donations.
Yes, we're currently going through a fundraising cycle right now. And I believe the Dog Aging Project Institute recently went live. If you Google Dog Aging Project Institute, that's probably the best way to find out about it. I'm more involved on the research side of things, so I can't speak very well on all of the details, but we definitely have information on the Dog Aging Project Institute website. Though I'll warn you, we don't have a link from the QR code that I've posted on the screen to the Dog Aging Project, Dog Aging Institute. They're both separate right now, and so you might have to Google it separately if you'd like to find out more about that.
Yeah, I think you do have to Google them separately, but it's a good Google. Well, excellent. Well, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for attending. And it has been recorded, so it can be found on the GMO, the Gray Muzzle Organization website.
Okay. Thank you so
Thanks
much,
again.
everybody.
Bye-bye.